These creepiest dark web horror stories you can't unhear are scary stories that will make you fall asleep. I'll assume you all know about the dark web. Well, what you've heard is true, and it certainly isn't a great place. So, sit back as we take you through these scary stories. You might want to turn the light on. Story 1. A Twisted Obsession. The vast majority of us know that the internet is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the web. You may discover yourself in a section of the deep web if you scratch the surface and possibly explore a little deeper. Now, I will give you a glimpse into my intriguing story. At first, it seemed like a joke and a good time, but it was horrifying when it was over. A mystery box I had obtained on the dark web was opened, and what I discovered inside was horrific. When the whole dark web mystery box trend began on TikTok and Instagram, I saw scores of videos of people opening up boxes filled with rubbish that they attempted to pass off as frightening and ominous. I found these videos to be completely intriguing. After deciding to sell my own mystery boxes, I had no idea that this error would have such a profound impact on my life that it would forever change the course of my existence. Everything seems to go off without a hitch. When I started, I had some cardboard boxes stacked in my closet that were the perfect size for the task. I also had some rusty screwdrivers that proved to be great as my murder weapons. My desk drawer brought up many outdated flash drives, from which I downloaded dozens of creepy videos. Eventually, I acquired some odd chemicals on the dark web, thanks to expired sinus tablets. It would have been better for me to halt before continuing on. If I had done so, I might have been able to preserve my life in the perils that were to come. As I was getting ready to go to bed, I had already become the proud owner of my new website, which is called the Showroom of Mysteries. Additionally, anyone could become the proud owner of my mystery box for the price of $50. With some of the burner identities that I had created, I sent a few messages to a few of the smaller channels the following morning in an effort to find consumers. I also made a few comments on the most recent films that they uploaded. Do you know what would be incredibly great if you were to make a video of yourself unwrapping anything from the dark web? Taking anything from the dark web out of its packaging. I'm willing to bet that it would receive millions of views. Afterward, all that was required of me was to relax and wait. I made 6 purchases by the time the day was up. It's not a lot that I'll be able to put together, but it's enough to help put food on the table. I had the boxes prepared for shipment by the time the afternoon came to a close. I did not intend to defraud these individuals. After all, they were allowed to create ridiculous videos, and I was allowed to eat. In my opinion, everyone was content. In the subsequent weeks, I was able to sell a few more, but gradually, interest in the product began to wane. Over the course of a few weeks, I progressively forgot about my time spent working as a deep web merchant. However, on a particular Friday, when I returned home from work, I discovered a package waiting outside my apartment door. When I took it in my hands and examined it, I discovered it was one of the mystery boxes I had on hand. At first glance, it appeared I had a dissatisfied client, but the truth was much more serious. When I brought it inside and opened it, I discovered it was empty, except for a flash drive I could not identify. Despite the fact that I was interested in knowing what was on it, I was not going to allow some unhappy hackers to infect my computer. To end my natural curiosity, I went and retrieved an old laptop that I had not used in quite some time and plugged it in. To my surprise, it was packed with photographs. Photographs of my homeland, photographs of my apartment, and photographs of myself. It was someone who had been following me and had been inside my house when they sent me this message. As I continued to look at those photographs, I became increasingly aware of how outside of my comfort zone I was. It was quite unsettling to come to terms with the fact that not only had someone entered my life, but somebody had also been inside my very own house. I was taken aback, terrified, and somewhat astonished. What was the purpose of this? Who was watching me or following me? My heart began to race while contemplating the repercussions of this heinous transgression. When I clicked on one of the photo folders titled Your Past, it presented an old family photo album that contained dozens of photographs from my youth, as well as pictures from family gatherings and vacations. When I first became aware of the extent of their incursion, I felt a flash of panic flood through me. However, when I proceeded further into the folder, You're Present, I found something that immediately caused my blood to run cold. Can you imagine what it was? It was a photograph of myself taken just a few minutes ago, taken from behind as I stared out the window of my apartment. Exactly when I was on the verge of being overcome by panic, a disturbing message appeared on the screen. It read, "You believed that you could make money from the dark web, but now it is time for your own mystery to unfold." I was so terrified that I examined the laptop to find any indication regarding the sender's identity. However, I could not find any clues. It was as if they had not left any trace, no breadcrumbs I could follow with my mind. However, I was perplexed and unable to derive any meaning from the circumstances that I found myself in. What was it that they desired from me? Where did they hide the terrible secrets that they had over my life? When I was on the verge of giving up and admitting failure, I became aware of a new folder on the flash drive that was ominously captioned, "Your Future." As I opened it with shaky hands, I was confronted with a collection of photographs that sent shivers down my spine. There were pictures of me in various stages of anguish in places that I had never seen before. It was as if someone had a glimpse into a horrible future, and I was the star of their nightmare vision. These pictures were of events that had not yet taken place. It was a folder I had not noticed before, titled, "Your Choice." The flash drive ultimately held one more folder. My quivering fingers opened it, and a single image flashed on the screen. It was a photograph of me sitting in front of the laptop just as I was then. What was displayed on the screen was a live stream. While I was staring at my horrified reflection, a message appeared on the screen that read, "The choice is yours, but every choice has a consequence." Suddenly, it dawned on me that this was more than just a game. It was a sick fixation, a horrible plan for my life that I could not fathom. The knowledge slammed me like a ton of bricks. And while I gazed at those foreboding photos, I could not shake the impression that my every action was now being monitored by an evil entity beyond my ability to control. During the time when panic was tightening its hold on me, my trembling fingers fumbled around on my phone. I required assistance immediately. I was impatient to hear the calming voice of the emergency operator, so I dialed 911. However, as the seconds passed, the call would not connect. Upon realizing that there was a significant issue with my phone, I was overcome with a sickening sense of dread. The result was the same. No signal, no connection, just quiet. I tried to redial frantically, but it was unsuccessful. On the other end, my heart was pounding in my chest as I confronted the horrific fact that I was the only person in this nightmare. Then, just when I was on the verge of being overcome with hopelessness, I heard the unmistakable sound of my front door being forcibly kicked in. When I discovered someone inside my apartment, I felt a wave of panic well up inside me. Someone had followed me, watched me, and now had me cornered. I was completely and utterly sorry that I opened the website and started that ridiculous business venture on the internet. I was only met with ill fortune and omens due to it. As I turned back to my laptop and shut my door, I was hoping to send a desperate plea for assistance. However, the message that I saw on the screen of my computer caused my blood to run cold. A message emerged, and all it stated was, "Look behind you." Immediately, everything went blank, and the lights started to go off and on. I didn't know what else to do or who to help me. I stood up from where I was sitting and tried to switch on my phone light, but I couldn't. Could this be a sign? Am I being punished for nothing? I screamed, but the echo came back to me like thunder. Just as I was about to reach for my laptop, the light went on again. I gave a sigh of relief. Then, another message popped in saying, "Avoid dark web." That was the last time I ever went on that site. I couldn't tell anyone, but it felt strange to me. I thought I was going to die that day. I learned my lessons, but learned it the hard way. Story 2. Dark Secrets of the Internet. Do you remember when those deep web stories were a fad? Every week you would get a new story of someone going too far on the deep web, discovering something horrific, and ending up getting assaulted for speaking out against it. I was a victim of this. I was a high school senior when it was a fad, and I was definitely not a popular kid. As the few students who ventured to violate the norm, my friends and I were considered to be the oddities of the school. They informed me about the deep web, a section of the internet where you are fully unobserved, anonymous, and allowed to engage in any activity you like. I couldn't help but be curious. The majority of my buddies only used it to purchase drugs, but I had a somewhat more expansive impression of it. I was curious about what occurred in the deepest parts of the internet world, the deep web. The question that I wanted to know was whether or not my friends were speaking the truth when they talked about terrible fetish websites and assassins that you could hire. Indeed it was. The mystery of it all captivated me. I had no intention of using any of it. I've never been particularly interested in anything. Visiting these sites would be an entirely new experience, like peeking into a side of the globe that few have hardly seen. I used to get bored with my daily routine, which consisted of getting up at the same time every day, going to school, attending the same classes, talking to the same people, going home, playing games, doing my homework, sleeping, and then repeating the cycle all over again. What if other people also became weary of it, I wondered. Even though I was captivated by the deep web, I was apprehensive about the potential consequences, so I hesitated to explore it more. I discussed it after reading the stories. Who hasn't been terrified of being followed or threatened by a stranger they found annoying online? Such things prevented me from accessing the deep web until I overcame my inertia and resolved to break free from the tedium, explore the internet's dark corners, and discover a world I had only imagined. You know those days when you get so bored that you want to do some crazy things just for fun? That was exactly how I was feeling at that moment. It was nothing as bad as I had anticipated. For the first week, it was simply drug sites and stuff where individuals divulged government secrets or anything. Not only did I not want to pursue a career in politics, but I also don't take drugs that I find unnecessary. I was completely let down. My sole motivation for continuing to explore was my intense desire to see the world I believed to exist, a world that was more sinister than any drug site. Eventually, my request was granted. I found what I sought when Hyatt's point about my indifference to the deep web was achieved. The website had no name, so for a while I assumed it was a bad link because it took me to a dark screen. However, before I could close the window, a chat box appeared. "Congratulations, you found the worst place on the internet," someone called the admin typed. More confused than scared, I stared at the computer for a while before typing, "Cool, what else was there to say?" "I've come to watch your best footage of individuals getting wounded intentionally," the administrator answered a while later. "You want in?" I wavered, my mind overflowing with all those tales. But it was too late to back down. I had to see what was there and break the monotony. I had to do this, even if I just clicked out at the first sign of danger. In fact, I continued typing without stopping. Yes, the chat window closed. I was then taken to a place that appeared to be a video with another chat window adjacent. There were about 6 other people there, all of whom were impatiently awaiting something. Nevertheless, the movie featured a little room with a wooden chair in black and white. After waiting for around 7 minutes, the door and chamber opened, and a man was pushed inside while wearing a blindfold and a pair of black underwear. A lady followed him inside, clothed entirely in black with a mask covering her face. The chat room instantly became crazy. Knowing right away where this was leading, I nearly closed the window to save myself, but I reminded myself that this was what I wanted. Perhaps not the torture, but the glimpse into the world's darkest corners. Taking a knife out of her pocket, the woman cut off the man's blindfold and pushed him into the chair. He didn't struggle for a second, though, and when his eyes opened, I understood why. It appeared as though he had been drugged, making resistance unfeasible. I scowled and cast a sidelong glance, realizing something was wrong. Despite my conscience telling me to click out or phone the police, I pushed myself to watch. One of the chat members typed, "One of the fingers, get the fingers," as she twisted the camera and pointed the knife at the man's throat. I balled my hands into fists and inhaled deeply, wondering whether this would happen. Was I to stand by and watch as a tiny group of people disfigured this guy for their own entertainment? Initially, I was perplexed. Was this the main purpose of the dark wedding? I secretly hated having developed such a nasty desire. The woman turned to face the man and nodded, which made me feel even worse. I planned to flee while holding my breath and moving my cursor over the X, but I didn't. The woman gave off the impression that she didn't think anyone in the chat room could surpass her request. Someone else had called to amputate his arm. He was bleeding profusely now, obviously in anguish, but these people were encouraging it, offering her new and excruciating ways to torture him. I eventually stopped feeling nauseous and stopped breathing heavily. I was beginning to warm to it. By the time it was all finished, the man lay bleeding heavily and on the ground. I stayed tuned for about 30 seconds. The chat room was full of dying folks. They'd done enough damage and enjoyed themselves. Everything looked like it was coming to a close. Funny, I grinned as I remembered how it was all over when I first started to get into it. I entered the chat window for the first time and said, "This is better than any game I could play, much better than any class I could attend," and his throat. She gave me one last nod and complied with my request. When it was finished, she let go of him, and he collapsed onto the floor, lifeless. The chatters began praising her, discussing how much fun it had been again, and deciding when to have the next concert. The woman on screen left the room, leaving the poor man's remains behind. I quickly jotted down the next viewing date since this would be a permanent part of my life. I would be a part of something greater and give these individuals orders at any moment. I adore the deep web because it's such a rush. I have no idea how you may feel about it or perceive it. Yes, indeed. I truly don't care anymore, even though I know it's wrong and will only increase animosity and create a negative impression of you. I'm having as much fun as I ever could have, and at least my routine has changed to keep me from becoming bored. I adore this dark web's blank space. Hope you are getting thrilled by these creepy stories. Before we move to the next one, please click that subscribe button to Top Scares, where we bring you intriguing stories that will scare and blow your minds. You can like, share, and comment on this video. Let us know what you think. Now, it's time to get comfortable, switch off your webcams, and let the darkness take control. Ready? Story 3. The Ultimate Revenge. A few years back, I committed a horrible act. Since I can never take it back, there are moments when I sincerely wish I hadn't. Everything began after I broke up with my girlfriend. I understand that this may seem unimportant and simply a natural part of life and personal development, but regrettably, it had the opposite effect on me. You might be correct that I should have just let it go, but I didn't. Perhaps you'll think I'm naive and should have just taken it on the chin. I was not only hurt, I was deeply hurt. How could she? I felt insulted and offended. I'd done a lot for her after all. She was destitute and homeless when I offered her a place to live, assisted her in paying off all of her debts, and helped her land a well-paid job. Despite this, she tossed it all in my face as if it were nothing. That was not going to happen without a response from me. My only ever desire was to exact retribution to mend my wounded heart. I couldn't even sleep because I was so depressed and angry. I was feeling so enraged and upset that my body was trembling. One night I turned on my laptop while harboring hate and gloom in my heart. I wasn't before, and I've used the dark web before. I've devoted numerous hours to attempting to traverse it, but all I've ever found are the standard drug sites, honey trap sites, and of course, an abundance of forums. That being said, I had no idea what I was looking for, let alone where to go if I did. Subconsciously, I suppose, I understood deep down that all I wanted was for her to get hurt just the way she had hurt me. I wanted to make her feel as embarrassed as she had made me feel, and I wanted to degrade her in the same way that she had degraded me. It seems that I still possessed private images and videos of her from our time together, and in my depressed and resentful condition, I decided it would be a good idea to use these against her. I started my search by clicking on link after link until I found anything interesting. The bad list was the name of the forum. Do you know someone bad? If so, maybe you should put them on the bad list, was the first question. This was it, I thought, perfectly. We'll see who laughs when I post her private images and videos there, and possibly even provide a link to her social media accounts. She was back living with her mother, so I drew the line there, even though I debated including her address. I realize how considerate I am when thinking of her mother. But the forum wasn't what I had anticipated. It was not possible to upload straight to their home page. Instead, there were other parts, or what they called punishments. Everything struck me at the time, especially how theatrical everything was. Frosty Fields, Krampus, and Elf on a Shelf are just a few of the numerous sections. Yes, I realize it's very holiday-like. I thought that kind of made me laugh and take it less seriously. I smiled at the Elf on the Shelf, but that's not what I chose to go with. But I went with Sleigh Snatcher since I thought it was kind of amusing. It took me a minute and a half to see this bright white page with a heading that said, "Santa is waiting to write up his bad list. Please fill in the specifics. He'll take care of the rest once I click on it." Although I also thought it was dumb and sweet at the same time. Nevertheless, I filled it in. I found exactly what I was searching for: the person's name, age, birth date, and links to their social media accounts. Not to mention photo uploads. I recall thinking happily, half cackling, smiling, thinking sneakily. I couldn't post videos, but the pictures were more than sufficient. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't ready to go that far, but I did write in her hometown, our hometown, which is something I really regret doing now. It also asked for the person's address. Thus, without thinking twice, I hit submit when I completed entering her information. A little text box with the question, "Are you sure Santa won't forget? He checks that list twice, all names are final," appeared briefly. I nodded smugly, and that was all. Fantastic, I thought, until I got led to another page. It took many minutes for this page to load, but when it did, I was surprised. It said, "We sincerely appreciate your submission to the naughty list. Thank you. Enjoy yourself while Santa takes down and captures those mischievous characters. Santa will empty his sack, and he can tell when you've done something wrong, since he knows you in one." This brought me back a little bit. It took me many minutes to get its message, and I simply burst out laughing once I did. I mean, come on, it was gross and, okay, admittedly sick, but it was sort of amusing, and there's no way it could be genuine anyway, so I didn't care, and I had accomplished my aim, as horrible as that sounds. I assumed she would be humiliated after the task was over and everything was uploaded, since others would see them message her on social media. So, feeling better about myself, I turned off my laptop and ensured everything was properly erased, ensuring I couldn't be found or linked to anything. I realized I was already under a lot of protection. However, as any user of the black web will attest, it's always best to be cautious than sorry. I woke up the following morning grinning the largest, creepiest smile I've ever had. I must have resembled the happy Lucifer cat from the animated Cinderella story. Even though I couldn't wait to see the results of my labor, thinking back on it now makes me feel nauseous. I was so darn proud of myself. I couldn't wait to watch her suffer. I wanted her to be hurt, and more precisely, I wanted her to know that it was me, even though there was no concrete evidence to support that claim. I desired to shatter her and render her as unworthy as she had rendered myself. However, to my utter dismay and disgust, nothing took place. I waited a long time, but nothing came of it. No irate texts or phone calls. No absurd remarks on social media. It had to have worked, surely. But even if I did, I could not verify and would never be able to locate that link again. So, a few more days passed, and by then I was no longer as excited and was rather disappointed that it had obviously failed. If it had succeeded, no one would have been as cool as this, and I couldn't exactly go verify or ask her because that would have been a direct criticism of me. So eventually, I just gave up. As awful as it sounds, the entire experience had become tedious for me. It felt like I had somehow let everything out of my system. Sincerely, I thought it would be pointless to get revenge, therefore, I gave up on ever doing so. I turned my attention elsewhere to soothe my wounded heart because nothing materialized. Is it possible that the dark web would remain silent in such a situation? I was taken aback by what would happen next, which sent a shiver down my spine. I had never in my life been able even to fathom the possibility of it happening. After a few more days had passed, I was roused from my sleep by a loud knock on my door. I had entirely forgotten about the drama that had occurred in my previous relationship at this time. To provide some background, I live alone and don't receive many visitors very often. As a result, I was more upset to have been woken up than I was curious to see who was at my door for whatever reason. You may, therefore, imagine my surprise when I threw open my door and two stern-looking police officers met me there. Oh no, that concludes it. Everyone is going to think I'm some kind of freak because I'm going to prison, which, to be fair, I was at the moment. They begged to come in, and I felt obligated to keep my cool and avoid aggravating myself further. I recall thinking at the time that I should see what they wanted because I wasn't under arrest or anything, so I should come in and see what they had requested me to see. However, what they asked me totally shocked me. "How recently did you see Lizzie?" I was stunned and thought I looked like the world's most guilty person for a split second. I answered as calmly as possible after quickly wiping the look of surprise and worry from my face. I retorted that not since our breakup, which was around 3 weeks ago. This was accurate, but it didn't stop their investigation, close examination, or onslaught of questions. On the evening of the 6th, where were you? I was at home, and I told them that straight. Could someone please confirm this? They replied, "Well, no, I live alone, but one of my coworkers does drop me off at home after work every shift, so I guess he can." What time was this happening? I was honest with him. It was close to 10:30. I'm leaving here in about 10 minutes, and the cameras at work should show me departing at approximately 10 minutes to 20. He said, "Did you leave your property at any point after you returned?" I replied, "No," as meekly as possible, but with authority. The CCTV outside the apartments would confirm this. He started to relax a little from his intense stare into my eyes, so I decided to try my luck and ask, "What's this all about?" He said Lizzie had been reported missing and hadn't been seen in almost a week, but he couldn't offer specifics about an ongoing investigation. She never returned after her mother reportedly last saw her leave their house to go shopping and peruse the malls. Not long later, the police officers left and sincerely expressed their gratitude for my time. They did examine the CCTV with my supervisor and a co-worker who attested to the veracity of my account. Weeks went by, and Lizzie had not responded. I found it hard to accept that she had suddenly disappeared. That's not possible, is it? I reasoned that it couldn't have been my fault. Perhaps an obscene person had followed her on social media and discovered her address after I had shared the pictures with them, but it had to be a coincidence, and I thought, Santa's naughty list, get a grip. That ridiculous forum couldn't be real. I felt worse and worse the longer it went on. I knew I wasn't the physical reason, but I was the one who set everything in motion, if not the actual cause. This is the girl I once loved and still adore, and if I had done this, I would have caused this and her poor mother. They had been apart for years, and it was me who finally got them to reconcile, and for what? I felt just as bad as if I had done something to her. I could just ruin her beyond everything she could have ever imagined. I was unable to cope with the overwhelming shame and remorse. I tried to continue my life as usual, but it was difficult. I was unable to eat or sleep, and I knew that this suffering was something I deserved. Every time I felt sorry for myself, I would cringe because I am a monster. A wolf in sheep's clothes, if you will. Not her, but myself and I being self-centered, repulsive, and pitiful. Since I couldn't go to the police, I turned to drinking to help me fall asleep. Anything to dull the pain, anything to get the picture of her face and the sound of her screams out of my head. How was I able to? Even if I had to admit that my life was finished, selfish as it was, I doubt it would even make it easier for me to find her. Perhaps I was just acting cowardly, but there was no hope, and she had left. I looked forward to updates every morning, but each one that came out today made me feel less like myself. It was an agonizing ordeal until the day they eventually located her. On the edge of the next town, in an old abandoned factory, was where she was discovered. When I received the dreadful news, I couldn't believe it. I could feel my throat constricting to the point that I was having trouble breathing. I pleaded with anyone who would listen that there had to be a mistake, but sadly, none existed. I think I achieved my desire since she was found pushed down with her body inside a sack, a toy sack to be exact. I wanted her to suffer so much. It was unbelievable to me. I was sick, and I'm still sick when I think about it. I forced myself to believe that this had to be some sort of twisted joke, but I couldn't convince myself. They realized it was her, even though her body had severely degraded, and she was found entirely naked. Inside one of her eye sockets was a tiny piece of paper that read the list of transgressions. "Lizzie, you should have been good." I lost consciousness and fell to the ground where I stood. I struck my head rather forcefully, and upon regaining consciousness, I fervently hoped and prayed it was merely a nightmare. Was this real? Of course it was. I wish I could see her and apologize. It was all real and my fault. I have to live with remorse every day now, and not a day goes by that I don't consider confessing or taking my own life. I'm sorry for what the dark web did to you. I'm sorry for what I did to you. Sometimes, strangely, I believe that if I had confessed, it would somehow make up for it. I realize that's not conceivable, though, since I have no idea what they did to you, what they made you go through, what fear and terror you must have experienced, what your last thoughts might have been, or how lost and alone you must have felt. I truly wish to take it back, but I can't. Lizzie, you deserve justice, or at least the opportunity to rest in peace. Regardless of the response, I'm just too much of a coward, but perhaps admitting will help you and your family find closure. Story 4. The Deadly Cult Group. I'm Gracie, and I live in the Netherlands with my parents. Because of what happened to my sister a year ago, I can never be left alone by them. When my sister was a high school student, she was a grumpy teenager who became agitated and irritated over trivial things. My previous job was at a bookshop close to her school. When I went to get her from school one day, I witnessed her fighting with a boy as they were standing on the school's walkway. She broke off their talk when I approached and entered my car. She remained silent the entire time, and I approached her about it later since I wanted to give her some space. On Saturday, the following day, I decided to spend time with my sister to lift her spirits. I went into a room where she was engrossed in something on her computer. I sat beside her and asked, "What are your plans today? Would you like to do anything enjoyable?" Gracie gave me a sidelong glance but remained silent. Although managing an adolescent might be challenging, I was also adamant. I caught Gracie browsing the internet. "Which book are you now reading?" When I asked her about it, she said she was using the dark web, which has a platform called Hidden Answers that is comparable to Quora on Google, where you can post questions and receive answers. However, any question can be asked with hidden responses, regardless of how strange the answer is. People on these platforms can become creepy because the dark web can be accessed under an untraceable identity. Believe me, I speak from personal experience. "I don't think this is safe for you, Gracie," I told her. I also started using my free time to browse the dark web to stay informed about what my younger sister was getting into. The platform's secret responses are so unsettling that I can't believe somebody could be this crazy. I came across a brief exchange in which someone inquired as to how I could dispose of my mother's corpse without drawing unwanted attention to myself. I was really afraid because I assumed someone would be making a joke, but after reading the responses, I understood he wasn't. The fact that someone responded to this by stating, "You can chop the body into small pieces and slowly get rid of it," made it feel much creepier. For instance, you may covertly feed your dog or your neighbor's dog the solid parts and then burn down the remaining portion every night in small increments. I did the same with my husband's body. I immediately removed myself from that page and decided to discuss it with my sister, avoiding the dark web. When I took Gracie grocery shopping the following day, I informed her about the terrible talk and the withheld answers, but I was shocked by her response. Gracie only smiled at me and shrugged her shoulders. "God, sis, quit telling me what to do. Go live your own life, buddy." "I'm hurt," she remarked in a nasty way. I refrained from speaking to her since I knew she would respond negatively, so I tried not to discuss the subject again. However, I wished I had taken on more. Before she made that one catastrophic decision that forever altered our lives, I regret not telling her how much I cared. My mother stated something strange during dinner with my parents while Gracie was at her friend's place for a sleepover. "Jane, I think Gracie is up to something unholy," she added, glancing at me. I was taken aback because this was not what I had anticipated. "Why do you say that, Mom?" I questioned. My sister's room needed to be cleaned in the afternoon, and while doing so, my mother discovered some strange items beneath her bed. I went into a room and peered beneath her mattress. Inside a wooden box was a long rope holding burned pages and 2 candles fashioned like snakes. Though I could not see the partially burned pages, I realized Gracie was now going too far. I assured my parents they didn't need to worry about anything since I would take care of everything. I went to her school secretly the following day and tried to find the boy I had seen arguing with Gracie the day before. When I questioned him about what I had discovered beneath her bed, the boy revealed to me that he had broken up with Gracie because she had instructed him to participate in a satanic ceremony she had heard about on the dark web. She claimed that by guiding someone into a once-in-a-lifetime spiritual encounter, this ritual can induce a state of euphoria. I went home and waited for my sister to come since I was so anxious about her. Gracie's eyes were puffy and swollen the moment she got home. It was obvious she didn't get any sleep at her friend's place last night, which is when I concluded something happened there. She approached her room and shut the door. I said to her, "Gracie, open the door. I know you're up to something very bizarre." I knocked on her door. "Open the door immediately. You have no idea how dangerous this can all get." Instead of opening the door, she once cried out, "Why can't you just mind your own business?" from a nearby room. "I am no longer your little sister. That's okay. It's my life. I will come out when I feel like it." My sister and I were in the house and my parents had visited my grandmother, so I didn't know what else to do. I thought I would chat with her when she came out, so I walked downstairs and sat on the couch. I couldn't tell when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, everything felt like a nightmare, the only difference being that this nightmare was actually happening. My mouth was taped shut, and my hands were tied tightly behind me. I was left lying on the ground, terrified that someone had broken into our home. I tried to scream in a muted voice because I was afraid and worried about Gracie, but all I came out with was a suppressed wail. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the door was closed from the inside, but I could still hear voices from upstairs. A little while later, I heard footsteps coming near my ear. My younger sister was the one who was coming down the stairs, but she had changed. My head felt heavy, so I figured Gracie had tied me up this way after rendering me unconscious with chloroform or something similar because she was dressed entirely in black. Gracie leaned on me and started laughing loudly. She was utterly insane. I started to cry. Then she said, "Jane, you just can't stop me. I knew you would try. I'm going to take part in a spiritual endeavor." She sounded more and more insane as she talked. She added that she had read in Secret Answers that a suicide attempt may provide the highest level of spiritual experience possible, according to a satanic organization. The event occurs just before you think you're going to pass away. One can see the universe winding down in front of their eyes instantly. The events that followed wrecked a young life and permanently hurt our family. Gracie hooked her neck to a rope hanging from the ceiling before my eyes, after climbing up on the adjacent chair. I ran across the floor to break free, but I could not do so. My eyes were seeing things that I could not believe. If only she realized that she could not undo the terrible deed she was about to do. I let out cries and screams, making a conscious effort to release my hand so I could sprint towards her and stop her. Gracie answered, "Don't worry, Jane, I won't die. I will take it off at the right moment," as she gave me a blank face in that pose. I knew she was ill. As she said, all I wanted to see was who I was, and I wanted to feel what they said they did. Her eyes shifted erratically as she spoke, and her eerie smile made it clear that she needed assistance, but I could do nothing. She kicked the chair with a loud thump. Gracie's body began to tremble like a fish out of water. Suddenly, she grabbed her rope and attempted to remove it. But oh, my little sister, she could not do so because it was tied so securely that her feet continued to swing in the air. I could see her choking in front of me. I sobbed uncontrollably, but nothing stopped the moment. Upon arriving home, my mother fell to the ground upon discovering my younger sister's lifeless body suspended from the ceiling. My father was clueless about what to do when he saw her hanging in our living room, and I was unconscious, strapped and glued to the ground. After calling the police, they carried her body away on a stretcher. Sadly, my sister passed away in front of me. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to save her. She was stolen from our lives by the dark web. Meanwhile, my mother stopped talking and just sat in our living room, staring at the ceiling where Gracie had committed herself. I've repeatedly mentioned that we moved to a different house, but she has consistently refused. If you are viewing this, I want to tell you that although my mother thinks Gracie is still with us in the house, the dark web is not the best place to go for answers if you are experiencing any kind of personal difficulties. It goes without saying that the website destroys your peace of mind and leaves you broken for the rest of your life. It obliterates your inner contentment and tranquility, or that of your loved ones. Avoid this hellhole at all costs, since it will drag you down to a point where you will never be able to rise above it. Whenever you need support, reach out to your friends and family. You should also confide in a trusted individual about your suffering. You probably know that one person well. Help others if you notice them in a similar circumstance. I looked everywhere but could not locate any evidence of that cult group in the responses concealed on the dark web. I have nightmares about my younger sister choking herself to death and struggling for air, which keeps me awake at night. There is nothing I can do to bring her back, though it still hurts me. Story 5. The Deadly Trip of No Return. I keep hearing from people that I should never interact with the deep web because it's a very dangerous area and only negative things can come from it. I will tell a story, and some people have even blamed me for it as if I had anything to do with what happened. I constantly answer those individuals with the same question. Do you know what the worst thing about the dark web is? You can become ensnared in it even if you take no action or even if you are unaware of its existence. It is possible for you to fall prey to it. I will explain how it happened to me. My friends and I went on a lovely field trip in July. Despite being an adult unit, we were all 18-year-old guys under an instructor's guidance. We were all scouts. That day, we would watch scary videos from my favorite YouTube channel, Top Scares, or maybe untie knots, build a campfire, and tell ghost stories. That's just how the day began. And later in the evening, we pitched our tents around a circle to have marshmallows. A few of us took turns searching for wood, while others had to go exploring. The more seasoned of us would lead the way with a map. We camped in a rural area, far away from other people's lives and cell phone service. This implied total isolation, which initially seemed thrilling, but quickly became our greatest fear. We set up camp next to a tiny brook with larger trees enclosing the area and obstructing our view of the starry sky. After finishing our chores, we all returned to work and started preparing for the evening. After setting up the tents and building a fire, we began preparing our rations a few hours later. Like every other camping trip, the evening was filled with jokes and laughter among friends. But as the darkness drew nearer, we sensed an odd unease in the air. When we heard a distant branch rustling, we all sprung to attention and assumed it was a wild animal. After instructing us to wait, the instructor went to look into it. Everyone listened, and in a matter of seconds, someone appeared from his direction. But it was not the teacher. Suddenly, other men were dressed in black outfits, their faces hidden behind masks, and they were pointing their firearms at us. One of them clutched a camera, the other a rusted axe of some sort. We were frozen with shock and terror. With their masks on, the trespassers approached us gently and peered at us. They told us to get up and move toward the stream, and one of them talked in a distorted, mechanical voice. We felt as though we were living in a never-ending nightmare, but we had no choice but to obey. The intruders forced us to form a circle as we approached the brook. Our hearts were racing, and anxiety took hold of us as the man with the axe started speaking in a voice that chilled our blood. He told us that we were randomly selected to be the victims of his twisted fun as part of an MAB live show that was being broadcast on the dark web. The man holding the camera started to capture our faces, pausing at each of us. We started to cry, but we realized that sobbing would only worsen things since we were filmed for an unidentified audience in some obscure corner of the internet. The dark web psychopath clarified that the rules of the MAB game we were going to play says that only one of us would survive that night, and that the others would vanish into the forest's depths. We all instantly froze in place, feeling useless and terrified. Is this the end for us? To find out who would die first, the man set a bottle in the center of the ground and started to spin it. When it was done, the bottle pointed to one of my friends. He was seized by the trespassers and hauled into the shadowy forest. My friend was screaming for aid and pleading with us all to band together so we could assault the men. If not, we would all perish. I could still hear his cries. Who, though, would bail the cat? Who would initiate contact? Who had the guts to initiate that fight? Indeed, we had no strength and were defenseless. To tell you the truth, I still think about what he said a lot. He was right. Most of what happened that night could have been avoided. But can you really blame us for doing nothing? At the age of 18, we had never experienced significant difficulties in our lives until we were confronted by men from the dark web who wanted to play with us, torturing and eventually killing us. We were helpless to stop them. All we could hear were the terrified screams of our friends and the distant sound of dread. Although we were all staring at each other, and some of us were considering attacking the other person or running away, the truth is that we were all paralyzed with terror. The man with the axe looked at the others and said that only one of us would escape, and the others would suffer the same fate as the first guy. We were all convinced that there would undoubtedly be more people in the woods watching us, waiting for one of us to attack or try to escape hesitantly. We continued to listen to the sounds of our friends from a distance, which would haunt us for the rest of the night. Slowly, time went by, and fear began to grow. We couldn't decide whether to try to escape or hang around until it was our turn. At last, a second bottle was hurled towards one of my friends, and they guided him into the forest. This time, there were no screams, only an unsettling quietness that increased our level of fear as the evening wore on. Our friends kept getting killed one by the intruders. Every time one of them vanished, I felt more and more powerless and hopeless, because I knew that I might be the next to go, and my terror was intolerable.
No.
We were all starting to grow increasingly attracted to the idea of becoming the last one alive, and at one point in the night, none of us considered turning away from it. But it was going to get harder and harder to pull away or resist. We all became a scared flock of sheep ready to be slaughtered. We could only follow their commands without even recognizing it. Eventually, my best friend Leo and I were the only two still alive. We now had the opportunity to play, the man holding the axe told us, grinning menacingly. He offered us two options. Either we would reject and suffer an even worse destiny, or we would battle each other to the death, with the winner going free. What? Fight to kill? Why, my best friend, this was crazy. We couldn't scream for help at this point.
No.
Leo and I, on the other hand, were staring at each other in horror because we knew there was nothing else for it. It was a terrible, and it would be a vicious struggle. Although we were friends rather than murderers, the life at risk drove us to battle until one of us was left lifeless on the ground. Our blood mixed with muck, and the sound of our strikes reverberated through the night. We weren't actually fighting. We were just two teenagers weeping and beating each other. Leo's eyes told me that I was doing the same to him, since every punch I gave him felt like a punch to me. You know, I've known him my entire life. On my first day of high school, he was the first person I spoke to, and ever since we have been best friends. Leo was like a brother, someone I was attempting to beat in order to save my own life. Neither of us could have easily defeated the other if we had truly wanted to, but all of our strikes were like content. The Axeman recognized that although we both wanted to live, we couldn't bring ourselves to give up on anything. His impatience was evident on his face, and as the man with the camera talked to him, I saw the Axeman frown and make ready to attack. This suggested, as I knew that he found the fight dull. In that desperate moment, I forgot about Leo and focused instead on my parents. I imagined how sad they would be if something were to happen to me, and I considered how my father would take the blame for my passing because he had urged that I come at that precise moment. I sobbed and shut my eyes as I struck Leo as hard as I possibly could. The man with the axe was taken aback by Leo's quick defeat but burst out laughing. The axe-wielding man approached me and gave me congrats for making it through. He offered me the chance to tell the story and to go home as the victor, but he also threatened to do terrible things to my family and me if I didn't tell the narrative. I was therefore abandoned to travel through the dark forest by myself, traumatized. I jogged aimlessly without turning around until I came onto a route that brought me back to civilization. When I got to the police station, I told them what had transpired, but they could not locate my missing pals or any evidence of the dark web cycle pathways. The dark web is a shadowy, enigmatic, and challenging place to navigate. I know deep down that they are simply fantasies, but sometimes I feel like I have to do something like search for them in exact retribution for what happened to Leo. I'm forced to live the life of a coward who intends to keep their family alive. Up till now, it still feels like a dream, or probably a bedtime story, I don't know. Either way, I still can't place my hands on anything that happened that night. Eventually, I told my story, but no one believed me. They all thought I was making up the story to catch a cruise. This is no movie or story or some sort of horror book. It was real, and it happened to me. I think the dark web should be avoided. But what is your opinion about it? You can drop your comment down below. Check out our previous video if you want to carry on the dark journey.